everyone, let's move on. And before I get to exercise 3, I just kind of wanted to show you something. So let's look at this page. This is news.com. Okay. And I want you to look at this page, right? And I want you to, without me telling you, I'll give you like a moment or two to think about it. I want you to think about what is the top story, or at least one of the top stories. All right, so chances are this is considered the top story. Okay, this Timbaland and Swizz Beatz, suing Thriller, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The question becomes, well, okay, how do we know that this is the top story? And there's a couple reasons for it. One, it's near the top. We typically associate things at the top of a document to be the most important. This is usually hierarchy. Also, you might notice that it's bigger than the rest of the text, right? You can physically see the text here is larger than the text in these other stories. All right. So there's what we have going on here is a hierarchy, right? In this case, in design, we would call this a visual hierarchy. And a visual hierarchy basically means like what is the most important, what's the second most important, what's the third most important, okay? Now, typically the way this works is that size, but also whether something is bold or not will affect that. So for instance here, we look at this first, this review for the Rebellion Festival over the Winter Gardens, because it's like this is smaller, right? And it's not as bold as this. So once again, adding to the visual hierarchy. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to exercise 3. And let's take a look at this text here. So you can see I have a bunch of text right here. And I'm just going to right click, open in default browser. And this is going to open it up inside of Chrome for me. And you're going to see that I just kind of get a bunch of run-on text, okay? And the reason why is, like in the last video, this white space is being ignored here between all of my sentences here. And so they all just kind of, become a run-on sentence. The other thing, too, is that they're all the same size, right? See how the text is all the same size? So there really isn't any difference between this sentence and this sentence. What I want to do is I want to add hierarchy. Okay, and the way that we do that, at least for text anyway, in a web page, is we use what's called a heading. Okay, there's something called a heading 1. The heading 1 is the most important piece of text on the page. So think about like the title of a article or something like that. That would be the heading 1. The way we would write that in HTML code is using an H1. Then we have a heading 2. Heading 2 is the secondary heading. It's not as important as the primary heading, but it's also important. It's more important than other information. So in other words, like here, this might be the primary heading or the heading 1, but these might be heading 2s because although they're not as important as whatever is going on here, they're more important than maybe these other smaller stories that are going on there. All right, so we can have a heading 2 or an H2. We can have a third level heading. Okay, third level heading is, once again, it's not as important as level 2, it's not as important as level 1, which is the most important, but it's more important than regular text or any other heading below it. So that would be an H3. And essentially, we can have headings that go H1 through H6, or heading 1 through heading 6. So let's try that out. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to add an H1. Okay. This is going to designate this as a primary heading, or a heading 1. If I save and I go back, let's refresh. Okay. So a couple things happen here. One is you can see that this text became much larger than this other text, making it, more, drawing attention to it more in the visual hierarchy. It also made it bold, which you can see that also makes it stand out against this other sort of standardized text here. Okay. I'm going to go in here. It also kind of, like paragraphs, it kind of separates the text from each other as well. I'm going to go back to my document, and I'm going to add an H2, or a secondary heading, or a heading 2. I'm going to hit save. So notice opening tag, closing tag. And let's go back and refresh. And so you notice here that I have a heading. It's bigger than my regular text, but not as big as the heading 1. So once again, this is hierarchy. Hierarchy shows the level of importance. And so I'm saying here, this is more important than this. Okay. Now, I know this is making it big, right? Literally big, and it's making it literally bold, right? But I don't want you guys to get too caught up in exactly, how big or how bold the text is. That's not really the purpose of HTML. The visual aspect, like, whether something is bold or not, or how large it is in terms of the font size or whatever, or even things like color, that's not really the purpose of HTML. The purpose of HTML, as you talked about, is to structure things. Okay? We are here to say this is a heading 1. This is a heading 2. It's not to say what the heading 1 looks like. It doesn't, nowhere in my H1 does it really specify what font or color or, size of the text or anything like that. That's actually what we're going to be doing later on in the semester with cascading style sheets, also known as CSS. So when we do this, don't get caught up too much in how it looks when it's actually previewed in a browser. That's not really the purpose of HTML. The purpose of HTML is to structure. I am saying that this is more important than this because I've defined this as a heading 1 and I've defined this as a heading 2. And by definition, a heading 1 is more important than a heading 2, regardless of whatever it looks like. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and I'm going to add in my heading 3, and do a heading 4, we can do a heading 5, we can do a heading 6. Okay, opening tag, closing tag, opening tag, closing tag. What this is going to do is we've set up a hierarchy. This is more important than this. This is more important than this. By the way, you are allowed to have multiple heading 2s and multiple heading 3s and things like that if you want. In theory, you're not supposed to have more than one primary heading, because in theory, if you think about it from a semantic point of view, you can only have one most important thing. You know what I mean? If you have multiple most important things, then it's not the most important thing. You know what I mean? Now if I go back, let's preview this. You can see that it's setting this up. Each of my headings is given its own line. It's going down in terms of its physical font size, of how big it is, and it's also being bolded as well. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make here is, first of all, we're structuring our text, but we're worried, we're starting to think more about just semantics as opposed to what it actually looks like. So, like, what does it mean to be bold? What does it mean to be a paragraph? What does it mean to be a heading? Things like that, as opposed to what it actually looks like when we look at it. Okay, that stuff, like I said, we're going to worry more about that later with cascading style sheets, okay, which is going to come up in a couple of weeks. All right, so we've talked a lot about different types of HTML tags, and I've literally told you what they are. I said, here's a strong tag, here's a P tag, here's a H1, right? So that kind of begs the question, like, well, how are you supposed to know what these tags are? Because you can't just make them up. You can't just write any tag you want. There's actually a predefined list of tags. And so the answer is you actually can use a reference source. So if you go to today's files, or there's a good link here. This is a good reference to find out about different tags. So I'm going to click here. This is a good source I like to share with students. It's called w3schools.com. And I'm going to click here under tutorials, and I'm going to go to where it says Learn HTML. And this is a good resource in that it kind of tells you about basic stuff. So for instance, here's a whole section on headings, and it will tell you what it does, and there's actually some working examples you can do here. So if I do want to try it yourself, this is actually a little built-in coder in the browser, and I can actually manipulate this. I can, I am adding code, hit run, and you can see that it appears over here. So this is a good place to kind of look up stuff. There'll be different things I talk about over the next couple classes. You may want to look at, find another source, or, look at an example. So W3 Schools is a good place for that. What I'm going to do is under the HTML section, I'm going to come down here to where it says HTML tag list. I'm going to click on this. And it actually lists every single HTML tag that currently exists. Okay. We're not going to talk about all the tags in this class, because to be honest, there's too many. But we'll talk about just how would you look up a tag. Let's say I didn't know what the p tag did. I could find it here, and there's actually a definition of what it does that defines a p tag, defines a paragraph. Or if I click on it, it'll have an example of it that you can try out, and it'll define what it does. The p tag defines a paragraph. Okay, so this is a good place to find out about various tags and learn them. I mean, I'm going to go over the major ones in class, but in case there's a tag that I don't talk about and you want to understand what it does, you can always look it up and see what it does by clicking on it, and it will give you some more information. So if I wanted to find out what the strong tag did, click here. The strong tag is used to define text of strong importance. Typically it is displayed as bold. Okay. I also gave you guys some examples here in there we go. Here's some examples. So some of these we already talked about. Some of these are new ones. So we talked about the p tag. The p tag makes paragraphs. The strong tag will take text and bold it. EM is short for emphasis. It'll make text italic. Big will make text larger, big. Small will make text smaller. S is for strike through, that puts a line through your text. U is for underline. You can also use, we just talked about the headings, heading 1 through heading 6. Does a larger primary heading versus a lower level heading. And then we also can do superscript and subscript. So we can do all these various text formatting. So I'm going to go here to exercise 4. Okay. Let's just take a look at it. You can see I have 2 paragraphs here. And let's just save, and let's preview this in a browser. This is what it looks like. I want to come in and I want to apply some of this text formatting. So I'm going to go into here and I want to bold this part. So we can do that by just using the strong tag. So opening tag, closing tag, thing that it structures. For italicize, we're going to use the EM for emphasis. So opening tag, closing tag, thing that it structures. Let's use the U tag, opening tag, closing tag, thing that it structures. Let's use S for strike through, opening tag, excuse me, closing tag, thing that it structures. Okay. By the way, so I'm going to do this. You can see now when I refresh my browser, now that I've made these changes and saved it, I bolded it, I italicized it, I underlined it, and strike through. And what have I done to this document of text? Well, I've marked up, as in markup language, I've marked up this document with HTML tags. So that's where hypertext, markup language comes from. I'm marking this document with tags. Okay. Let's try a couple more. I'm going to add, let's add a subscript, or sorry, superscript. So if I had x to the power of 2, and I think I closed it, but did I close it? Maybe I did. Yeah, I think I closed it. Let me reopen it. This is what it would look like. I want to do a superscript. Super means above. Superscript means text that goes above the baseline. So there's kind of this imaginary baseline here that my text sits upon. I want to have this text go above it, so I can use, let me just blow this up so it's a little easier for you guys to see. Soup. Soup is short for superscript. Opening tag, closing tag. Oops, there we go. Okay, this is now above the baseline or superscript. I can do subscript. So let's say I had H2O. I want this to go below the baseline. I can do a sub for subscript. Sub always means below, like subdermal or submarine, something like that. Okay, let's save, go down. All right, superscript, subscript. You can see this is going below the baseline that I've marked out here. I'm going to show you one more. I probably shouldn't show it to you, and you probably shouldn't use it, but hey, let's have a little fun here. Don't tell nobody. Let's do marquee. I want you to try to guess what marquee is going to do. What is a marquee? And think about what a marquee is, if you know what a marquee is, and then think about how a tag might affect that. I'm just going to type in something. This text will be annoying. I think I misspelled annoying, but hey. All right, let's refresh. Hey, it's a marquee, like on a theater or a movie theater or a, you know. To be honest, I probably wouldn't use that on a real website, but hey, we're having a little fun here. Okay, so try that out. That was exercise 3 and 4. We're playing around with just doing more with tags. So we're playing around with applying heading tags and just general, you know, general just kind of text formatting tags. Okay.